Nuclear program have entered their final stretch. Negotiators are trying to reach an agreement before a July 20th deadline. Will the discussions aim to curb Tehran's atomic capabilities in exchange for a lifting of harsh economic sanctions against the country? Well, joining me now to discuss this story is political analyst Milad Jokar. Thank you very much for coming in and joining me on the program now. This latest round of talks, which they've been going on for quite some time. What are the main sticking points that remain to reaching a deal?
Well, first of all, we have seen in the past, in 2003, 2005, that they could reach the deal, but they couldn't at the very end. So now we are at the last kilometer of a marathon, and the sticking point, well, Iran has always sought to have the end game, to have a vision about the end game of the talks because of the lack of trust. So this is why Iran has said that if there are limitations on the nuclear program, it should be for a short period, and they are negotiating now this time frame.
One of the things, of course, that keeps coming up is the number of enrichment centrifuges that Iran can have. There seems to be some advances made on it, but it still is holding on.
Absolutely. So now they're talking about whether Iran needs this number of centrifuges. They have 20,000 centrifuges. 10,000 of them are currently working. Iran says it needs more. The West and the P5+1 says it needs less. But now Iran needs to, and Iran and the West, both of them need to sell the deal back home to their own constituencies. In Washington, Barack Obama, who's been very engaged, personally engaged through the phone call with President Rouhani a few months ago, he needs to sell this deal back in Congress, and same for Rouhani, who also has his own conservatives to negotiate with back in Iran. So saving face and having a doable deal is what matters most.
Well, then is there the political will to actually see this through?
Well, this is a historic opportunity. This is unique. We have never seen such a configuration within the last 10 years. On the one hand, in Iran, President Rouhani has been elected with a strong popular mandate to negotiate, to engage with the West. Along with him, he has Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif, who's been educated in the United States. Ali Akbar Salehi, who is the head of Iran's energy organization. He's also graduated from the MIT. And also Mr. Ali Shamkhani, who is a reformist, who heads the Supreme National Security Council. So all of these elements can help to find a deal. And in Washington as well, we have John Kerry at Foggy Bottom, we have Chuck Hagel in the Pentagon, and Barack Obama, who is personally engaged. So the success or the failure of the talks, Obama and Rouhani will be responsible for the success or the failure of the talks. They should not miss this opportunity, which is unique.
Well, a lot has been made, of course, of this July 20th deadline that is coming up. If indeed no agreement is reached by then, what next?
Well, there is the possibility to extend the talks, but both sides are committed to the July 20th deadline. After what we have seen in November, that there's been an extension of 1 week after for the joint plan of action. So it would not be dramatic, but they need to resolve it as soon as possible. Also, there is a kind of urgency because of what's happening around in the region, and solving the nuclear crisis, putting an end to this nuclear crisis, will unlock regional issues. And Iran, with its geopolitical position, is a heavyweight, and both the United States and Iran must recognize that each other, they have a stabilizing role in the region.
Well, let's talk about then Iran's strategic position, of course, the situation that we are seeing in Iraq and Syria with this Sunni militant advance on the country. Has that strengthened Iran's strategic position in terms of negotiations?
Well, let's unpack this. First of all, the nuclear talks are not going to be mixed with the regional security issues. They can happen on the sideline, but they're not going to bargain on the nuclear talks. In the region, for over the last 3 decades, Iran and the United States have always been talking about their differences. Now, their common interests are so obvious that they will have to deal with that. What are these common threats and concerns? One is, of course, to preserve a stable Iraq, to prevent Iraq from becoming a failed state, which is on the verge of collapsing. Of course, there's, as you said, the advances of the Islamic states that represent a common threat for Iran and the other powers in the region, Lebanon, also Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And of course, the last point is the oil issue, because the Islamic State is getting control of some oil resources that can change the international oil market.
If an agreement is indeed reached, it would be, of course, historic, which we all know, but what would it really mean then for the region? What would be the fallout, the impact?
Well, let's take a look at this in a geopolitical way. Iran in the Middle East, it can simply not be isolated over the long run. In the long term, this is not going to be sustainable. Iran in the Middle East is like Germany in Europe, if you want. It cannot be isolated. We remember what happened 100 years ago, well after the First World War, that isolating such a geopolitical power has consequences for the region. So what can happen next is, first of all, confidence building with the nuclear issue. If both sides keep their engagement, there will be more trust. And after this trust, they will be able to talk about different issues. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, of course, and other different national security concerns. And we understand that Iran is in the middle of an almost chaotic region, and the role of Iran can be a stabilizing role in the region.
All right. Well, Milad Jokar, thank you very much for coming in and sharing with us your perspective on this situation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, now British Prime